Honestly, there are points at which he's probably right. Um, at the end of the sermon today, I have an important announcement that I want to make to you. And then I'm going to ask you to get your phones ready because I want you to text me at the end of the teaching today. And so I'll put my number up on the screen, and we can have a conversation that way. And the objective is to be done in time to still beat the Baptists to Mose. Can I get a witness? Is that good? All right. So one of the ways that I've heard Church 180 described is as a non-judgmental place. And I like that. I like that anybody can come into this building with anybody. I like that anybody can come into this building dressed any way. Anybody can come into this building with any condition. Anyone can come into this building with any story, with any profile. I really do like that this is described as a non-judgmental church because, quite frankly, if you look at Jesus and the way that he interacted with people, he was incredibly unjudgmental, right? In fact, he did that. The one exception to that is he did have some harsh criticism, and that was typically for the most religious people, right? That was typically for the people that thought they had their stuff together the most. But the people that surrounded Jesus were often described as sinners and misfits and no-do-wells and just craziness. And so I think that when a room is filled with people who don't have our stuff together, that's probably where Jesus is the happiest. It's probably where he fits in the best. So look at your neighbor and say, "You're messed up and it's okay." I mean, you were thinking that anyway, so just go ahead and say it, right? And with that, we just completely ruined the idea that we're a non-judgmental church, right? All right. So what I want to do today then is I want to take this idea that we are a non-judgmental church, and I want to absolutely turn it on its head. And today, I want to be the most judgmental church in York County. Y'all good with that? No, listen, I don't want to. Oh, God. I want to today be absolutely the most judgmental church in York County. And so to be clear, to judge, the dictionary says that when you judge, you form an opinion on something or someone. And so today, what I want us to do is I want us to form an opinion of someone. Now, the person that I want you to judge is not sitting beside you. So stop, right? The person that I want you to judge is actually sitting in your seat. How about that? So just go ahead and touch the hand of that person that's sitting in your seat and say, "Today I'm going to judge you." Yes, I was just judged. So here's what I want to do, and I've been doing this to myself this week and part of last week. So I am going to join you in this exercise. And I want to ask you some questions. I'm going to put them on the screen, and then we're going to quietly and honestly answer them to yourself. You don't need to say them out loud, but I want you to do this to yourself. And here's what I want you to do. When you judge yourself, I don't want you to also be your lawyer. So in other words, when you answer the question, I don't want you to try to explain or defend or justify. I just want you to answer the question and let the facts be what they may. All right? And if you don't like the facts, that's okay. We can have a group hug later. Okay? Deal? Okay, so here we are. I'm going to put the question on the screen, and let's just take just a couple seconds, answer it honestly. Okay? Question number 1. What did you read this week? Could have been a book, could have been on social media, could have been on a website, could have been just on your Kindle, anything. What did you read this week? Number 2, what did you watch this week? All right? Number 3, what did you listen to this week? I mean, that could be music. That could be a TED Talk. That could be a podcast. Anything. What did you listen to this week? Number 4. What did you think about this week? Number 5. What did you learn this week? Number 6. What did you feed your mind this week? So, what were your inputs? Like, what were the things that were coming in to your mind all week long? Now, based on your self-assessment, where would you place yourself on this scale? Look at this scale. Are you closer to, say, Plato, or are you closer to, say, Donkey? We'll call him Jack. If you are the judge of yourself, and now we're being serious here, all right? Where on this scale, which end of the scale would you be closest to, based on your inputs? The things you read, the things you watched, the things you talked about, the things you learned, the things that you thought about. Where are you on that scale? Now, with that in mind, some of you are going to feel really good about this next verse, and some of you are absolutely going to not like this next verse, all right? So, but here's the verse we're going to talk about today. Here we go. Proverbs 15:14 says this: a wise person is hungry for knowledge, while fools feed on trash. Huh. Everybody doing all right? Okay. Now, there's a reason for this conversation today. And it's more than just judging and beating on ourselves, all right? Because I would guess that most of us would say, yeah, I spent a fair amount of time this week consuming stupid stuff on YouTube or senseless stuff on Facebook or flipping through Instagram for a crazy amount of time or reading or absorbing or listening to things that probably are closer to Shrek and his buddy than, say, Plato, right? But here's the reason that this is so important, what we're talking about today, right? A wise person is hungry for knowledge, but a fool feeds on trash. Here's why this is so critically important. You ready? Because someone in your life needs you to know. Someone in your life needs you to have some knowledge. Someone in your life needs you to have some answers. If you're a parent, this is particularly true for you. You have children who are looking to you for wisdom and knowledge. They have questions about life. They have questions about God. They have questions about sex. They have questions about money. They have questions about how to deal with conflict, how to have a great home, how to make marriage work. They have questions, and they need you to know. Some of you have friends who have intense questions about God, questions about how to make their marriage work. You have friends who have questions about dealing with suffering in this crazy world. You have questions. You have friends who have those questions. You may have a spouse that needs you to have some knowledge, that needs you to know some things. Maybe it's a neighbor or a sibling. Now, here's what I've noticed. The trend seems to be this, and it's not for everybody, right? But the trend does seem to be this. When we're in elementary school, we do learn. High school, we learn. College, we learn. And then we get into work, we learn, and then we're done. Right? I mean, studies consistently show this, that once we graduate from college, we basically stop reading. We stop growing. Not everybody, right? But we stop. And here's the truth. We're talking about this idea of wisdom. And let me just say this. Wisdom does not necessarily come with age. Because you know people, and I know people that are old and dumb. Right? I mean, we know people that have lots of years and have had lots of experiences, but they haven't really ever learned anything, and they're not wise. And yet you also know people who are fairly young and have an unreasonable amount, it would seem, of wisdom, knowledge. So the truth of the matter is, the people that God is going to use are people who are wise and seeking knowledge, people who are seeking to grow. We're going to flesh this out a little bit. Let me just show you a quote from a guy named John Piper. Anybody know who John Piper is? He's a pastor, he's a theologian, he's a deep thinker. Let me just show you what he said. He said, if we don't choose to think harder, we will settle for an adolescent level of understanding the rest of our lives. Essentially what that means is you may be 50 years old still functioning with an 18-year-old view of the world. It's possible to have been married for multiple decades and still functioning with a teenage view of marriage. And the reason is because at some point, the wise seek knowledge, but the fool feeds on trash. The fool keeps consuming what's easily and readily available. The wise, on the other hand, are consistently seeking and trying to evolve and learn more and grow more and understand more. Now, there's something beautiful about knowledge. Something beautiful about learning, having that aha moment, becoming familiar with new ideas and learning new people and understanding new things. I mean, so for me, the last handful of years have been very, very interesting for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have subjected myself to a huge extent to two communities that I've never really been familiar with, right? So sometimes I like to introduce myself to certain groups like this. Hi, my name is Paul. I'm white. I'm heterosexual. I'm fairly conservative. I've been married for 20 years to the same woman. I have 6 girls. That shapes my worldview pretty much, doesn't it? Right? So for the last several years, probably, almost since the time we've been here, God has been driving me into 2 different worlds. One is to become familiar with and to make friends with black men. This week I had the opportunity to sit in a car with a black man, and we're riding down the road, and we pulled up next to a sheriff, and I asked him a question. I was like, does that make you nervous when you pull up next to a cop? And we had this great conversation, amazing conversation. A conversation that as a white guy I can't understand, right? But to learn and to hear and to grow in understanding in that whole conversation is interesting to me. It's exciting. It's interesting. It opens up windows. It's just the other group that I've had this opportunity to get to know and ask questions to has been the gay community. I've had the same question, like, hi, my name is Paul. I'm white, conservative, heterosexual, and so that's weird, I know. But listen, the cool thing is I've made friends and I've got to ask questions and I've learned and it's just crazy what happens when we begin to grow in knowledge. It's just crazy the opportunities that God presents to us. Now, there's something beautiful about this, about learning about other people, about learning about other ways of thinking, about learning new ideas, etc. If you just were to look through the book of Proverbs, which is a book in the Bible, it's called wisdom literature, and one of the things that it has been for centuries, is a go-to place for people seeking wisdom. If you just quickly look through Proverbs, you will find a few things about this idea of knowledge. Proverbs 2:10 says it brings joy. Like when you learn something new, it brings joy. Like, wow, that makes you smile. That's good. That makes me happy. It feels good to learn new things. Proverbs 8:10 said we should choose knowledge rather than gold. Think about this. Let me tell you why. If you have I heard a guy, Darren Hardy writes about self-improvement, all this stuff. He said if you have a $30,000 mindset and you somehow come in possession of $250,000, you're going to blow that really quick, and it won't be long till you're back to a $30,000 mindset. That's why Proverbs says it's better to choose knowledge rather than gold, because if you can grow yourself from a $30,000 mindset to a 50, to an 80, to 100, to 200, and you hang on to that stuff, right? Proverbs said it. Choose knowledge rather than pure gold. Proverbs 9:10 says knowledge sets you up for good decisions. If you have knowledge, you're going to make better decisions. Proverbs 24:5 says those with knowledge will grow stronger and stronger. Now listen, someone in your life needs you to know. They need you to know some things. And so listen, particularly to parents and to employers and to spiritual leaders, guys, it's so incredibly important that we be growing in knowledge. We be learning things that are helpful and insightful. So how do we do it? How do we grow in knowledge? How do we learn things? So an introduction to this question comes from Eleanor Roosevelt. I love this quote. You've probably heard it. This is what she says. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. Now, with that in mind, let me just ask you to quietly consider the content of your conversations. Where do you spend the majority of your time? Serious question. Where do your content seem to linger the most? Are you talking about people? Are you gossiping? This is a good time to say this. From time to time, we say this at our church. One of the things we value at our church is honesty. Love honesty. We want to be honest with one another, all right? We want to be honest with one another. Now, if I come to you, or if you come to me and you tell me a secret, you tell me something that's going on in your life, and I go and I tell Casey Brown, you're not going to believe what DJ just told me over there. What did he tell you? You're not going to believe it. So I tell Casey, you know what DJ's going to do? DJ's going to say, I can't be honest in this church. I can't trust anymore. You put a whooping on me, wouldn't you? You're a big old boy. And I would deserve it. Now listen, here's what we say about gossip. If you gossip, you'll ruin the culture of our church, okay? So if you gossip, please stop. And if you cannot stop, please leave. Because we do not want you to ruin the culture of honesty that we're working so hard to establish. Good deal? All right, I love you, but we don't want you to gossip. Not ever. Okay. Now, that's the problem. If you gossip, it's a demonstration, it's an evidence that you have a small mind. Is that good? All right. Small minds discuss people. Average minds discuss events. Right? But great minds discuss ideas. Now, here's where we go with this. Consider the content of your conversation. What am I talking about? What do I talk about most? And then look at this. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. The fear of the Lord, or the understanding, the understanding of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge. Here's the thing about God. I'm on this quest right now. Do you guys use YouVersion on your phones? You know what YouVersion is? It's like the Bible app on your phone. And let me tell you something. It's really cool. You can actually set the reading pace. And so right now I'm on this quest to read through the Bible in 90 days, or read and listen to the Bible in 90 days. And I put my phone on double time, so I'm blowing through Leviticus, which is the most awesome thing ever, right? So, but I'm riding down the road, and I'm chugging down Deuteronomy. I'm riding down the road. So I'm in the Old Testament right now, and I'm going to tell you something. I'm blown away at God. He's terrifying. And I also want to stone everybody who's doing bad things, right? I just want to throw things at them. But sometimes, honestly, the less familiar I am with God, the less I fear him. The more I know God, the more I'm he is not to be tampered with. Because he will rock your world. The more you know God, the more you understand God, the more this holy sense of fear and awe and reverence we begin to have for him. And Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord, the better you understand God, the more you begin to establish true knowledge. Now, let me just ask this question. How much space in your day does God and God things consume? I mean, listen, I'm not judging you. I'm not putting my finger in your chest. I'm having this conversation with myself too, gang. Listen, 'cause I like Facebook. I like Instagram. I like Netflix. I like trash. You know what I'm saying? I do. You do too, right? So we all do. So we can just judge yourself, right? Now, but here's the question. How much space does God take up in your life? Because Proverbs says that understanding and knowing God is the foundation of true knowledge. For instance, the more I know God, the more I understand how to love. The more I know God, the better I understand the necessity and the how of forgiveness. The more I know God, the more I know how to confront people and issues. The more I know God, the more I know how to set clear expectations. The more that I know God, the more I understand how to best learn from history. The more I know God, the more I understand how to evaluate the present and discern trends that will impact the future. The more I know God, the better I understand finances. The more I know God, the better I understand sexuality. The more I know God, the better I understand how to be a good father. The more I know God, the better I understand leadership. The more I know God, the broader my foundation of knowledge becomes. This is a really big deal. Because the wise seek knowledge. Is this making sense? Y'all awake? Okay. The wise seek knowledge, but fools feed on trash. And the problem is trash is so readily available. Now, St. Paul says this, Colossians 2:3, in Christ lie hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. This is how I began my pursuit of knowledge, by connecting with Jesus Christ. And as I know him, and as I listen to him, and as I begin to follow his teachings, things like love and forgiveness and leadership and finances and self-control and wisdom and conflict and how to do relationships well, all of these things become, I just begin to know them, and I begin to get better at them. Look what Jesus himself said. Matthew chapter 13, verse 12. To those who listen to my teaching, more understanding will be given. Say this with me, please. And they will have an... To those who listen to me, Jesus said, they'll understand and they will grow in knowledge. On the other hand, those who are not listening, even what little understanding they have will be taken from them. Listen. Somebody in your life needs you to know some things. Somebody in your life has questions and they need you to have answers. And Proverbs says your knowledge begins with connecting with God, growing in this relationship with Jesus. Jesus said, if you listen to me, if you follow my teachings, you will grow in knowledge. So Solomon, St. Paul, Jesus, and a lot of other people agree on this. Here we go. The more you know God, the more you know. The more you know God, the more you know about the important stuff, right? Now see, remember what Eleanor Roosevelt said, small minds talk about people, mediocre minds talk about events, great minds talk about ideas. Listen, I don't need to know Jesus, I don't need to know God to talk about people. I just need to be on Twitter or Snapchat, right? Right? I just need to walk through the grocery store line and pick up the Inquirer, right? I don't need to know God to know all kinds of stuff about people. I don't need to know God to know about them. But by the way, listen, let me just be really clear. I'm not bashing that stuff. I'm just saying if that's all you know, I don't need to know God to know about the current state of politics. I'm not sure if that is an event or people, if that's a small mind or an average mind. I don't know where we are on that right now. But the truth of the matter is, I don't need to know God to know that stuff, but I do need to know God to understand the big ideas in life, things like love and forgiveness and wisdom and how to make relationships work and how to handle finances. I do need to have a theological understanding of God to increase that knowledge base. I mean, think about this. When we're in trouble, when things are not going well, when we're uncertain, what do? We say, God help me. We go to the one who knows, right? When we're close to achieving a goal, when we're getting close to accomplishing a win, we might say, thank you, God, or God help me for this one last little bit. We go to the one who knows. When life gets crazy, we turn to God because we believe that he knows and he can help. We believe he has answers. Now listen, Charles Spurgeon wrote an incredible paragraph about the beauty of studying and knowing God. It's really long, it's kind of weighty, and I was going to read it to you this morning, but I thought, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it on Facebook. So at 12 o'clock today on our church Facebook, facebook.com/mychurch180, there's going to be a great post by Charles Spurgeon in which he talks about the beauty and the joy and the goodness of studying and knowing God. And let me just say this. People who know God people who really know God. Listen, I'm not just saying you slap a bumper sticker on your car. I'm not just saying you listen. I know people who have Christian bumper stickers on their car who I'm not going to when I need counsel, right? You know that kind of person? Just because you go to church does not mean that you know God. Jesus said, the more you listen to my teaching, the more you get close to me, the more you listen, the more knowledge I will give you. And gang, I cannot tell you how important this is. Someone in your life needs you to know some things about forgiveness and love and understanding and learning and relationships and on and on and on. Someone in your life needs you to know. So how do you begin moving in that direction? How do you begin knowing God? How do you begin gaining knowledge? It really is this simple. It starts with changing your inputs. It really just starts with changing your inputs. So let me just give you a couple of examples, and we'll throw these up on social media all this week to just kind of prime the pump for you. Because at the end of the day, God wants his people to know some things, to have knowledge so that we can help one another. So for instance, here are some ideas. Spend less time on Facebook, more time in Proverbs. Spend less time on Netflix and more time in YouVersion. Spend less time reading Mary Higgins Clark or John Grisham and more time with St. Paul or C.S. Lewis or some other author that will make you think deeply. Here's a good one. Spend less time with your drinking buddies and more time with your thinking buddies. Spend less time with your Joe Rogan podcast and more time with your John Piper podcast. Again, I'm not saying that there's no room in your life for any of those things. I'm just saying if that's all that you've got coming in, you're not going to grow in the knowledge of God. It really comes down to this decision. What am I going to feed on? What am I going to put in my mind which will shape what I believe and shape how I act? Remember this, Proverbs 15:14. A wise person is hungry for knowledge while the fool feeds on trash. St. Paul wrote this to a young church in Rome. He said, look, friends, young Christians, this is what he said. I myself am convinced, my brothers and sisters, that you yourselves are full of goodness, say this with me, filled with knowledge and competent to instruct one another. Listen, here's the truth. I need you to know some things because there's going to come a point in my life where I'm going to need to come to you and say, I have a question about money or relationships or conflict. I have a question about guilt. I have a question about forgiveness, and I need you to help me process this. And if all you've done is feed on trash, you can't help me. And you need me to do the same thing for you. And Paul looked at this church and said, I know that you're filled with knowledge and able to help one another. And this is what the church does. We're all moving closer to God. We're listening to what Jesus says. We're doing what he says. We're growing in knowledge so that we can help one another, so that we can teach our children, so that we can teach new Christians, so that we can teach people who don't yet know what God would have for us to do. Listen, there are people in the church that need you. There are people in your school that need you. There are people in your neighborhood that need you. People in your home that need you. Listen, when times are tough or when opportunity presents itself, do you want to be the guy with jokes or do you want to be the guy with knowledge? When someone really needs help, would you prefer to have a joke ready or would you prefer to have an answer ready? The fool feeds on trash, doesn't offer much, while the wise seek knowledge and are a blessing and helpful. And that pursuit starts with knowing God better and better and better. Now, how long have I preached so far? I don't even know. How long have I gone? Somebody tell me. Like 30 minutes? Is 11 o'clock? All right. Because I got something to say. Y'all, just make sure the person next to you is awake, because I want to turn a corner here. I want to tell you something that's going on in our church. Make sure the person next to you is awake. Go ahead, lay hands on them. Okay. So I want to tell you about something that we're getting ready to do at Church 180. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago at Inside 180. And if you weren't there, Inside 180 is basically where we circle up and we have a conversation about what's going on at our church. We talk about the behind-the-scenes stuff. And so what we're beginning to do is we're beginning to introduce this concept, this idea of elders, spiritual leaders. The Bible calls them elders. By the way, this has nothing to do with age. Remember, you can be old and dumb, right? An elder is someone who is spiritually qualified to provide leadership in the church. Now, let me tell you why we're doing this. Because if we're not careful, we can build a church that's centered around one person. Now, I'm good, but I am not good enough, right? I am not enough. I have a lane. God has given me gifts. He's given me a calling. I'm clear about what I am to do and where I am to do it. But the church that Jesus wants to build needs more than me. It needs you. It needs us. And the Bible talks to us oftentimes about elders and having something called elders, which are people who provide spiritual leadership in the church. Now, let me just quickly run through. St. Paul was writing a letter to a young protege of his, Timothy, who was starting a church in a really crazy city. And Paul said, you've got to appoint these spiritual leaders, these elders. And I'm just going to read through what he said. You need to be looking for these characteristics, Timothy, when you appoint elders. All right? Now, here we go. On the screen. He said, now the overseer, or the elder, is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace, into the devil's trap. Now, that is what the church is looking to produce.